I first met Joe Williams. It would have been in the mid-'70s. We had a mutual friend named Frederick Drummond, a rancher in Osage County that owned a nice, beautiful ranch southwest of Pawhuska. And Frederick liked to quail hunt. And so Frederick had the land and I had the bird dogs, and he would invite me to come quail hunting and, oh, by the way, bring your dogs. And that's how I met Joe Williams.
Joe was here just at the right time, kind of divine intervention, I guess, that the right guy in the right place at the right time with the right opportunity, and he seized it.
Well, Joe was just a great individual to be with. He was a pleasure to be around. He was always positive. He savored the moment. He was appreciative of what Mother Nature provides us, and he wanted to see that preserved and kept for future generations. You know, it had been a goal of the National Park Service and other conservation organizations since the 1930s to have a prairie park. We have almost 400 entities in the national park system. You know, everything from deserts to seashores to rivers to mountains to you name it. Tallgrass Prairie was the missing link, and it was the goal that always escaped their grasp. In 1984, an effort began here in Osage County to establish a Tallgrass Prairie National Preserve, owned by the National Park Service. We established a local support group in Pawhuska called the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve Association, and Joe joined that group, and Joe contributed to that group. And when a bill was introduced in the United States Senate in 1987, Joe provided transportation for several local people, including himself, to go testify before the Senate. So Joe was involved starting in the mid-'80s. And then when that bill died in 1988, Joe realized the opportunity to purchase very high quality, large scale chunks of tallgrass prairie. That opportunity would soon expire. And if we didn't act quickly, that it would be lost for who knows how long. And in 1989, the Nature Conservancy purchased the 29,000 plus acre Barnard portion of the Chapman Barnard Ranch as the cornerstone of the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve. So I tell people the Nature Conservancy did in 5 years what the federal government could not do in 50.
The reason that we're here, the reason the Nature Conservancy is here, is because of kind of the unprotected nature of the tallgrass prairie ecosystem. So only about 4% of the original tallgrass prairie, as compared to a couple hundred years ago, only about 4% of the original prairie still exists. So it's one of the most highly altered ecosystem types in the world. This is the last big chunk, really, on the continent, about 4 to 5 million acres. And the reason it's here, I think there's two primary reasons. One is the geological protection. Very shallow soils for the most part, very stony. A lot of these soils could not be plowed, especially 150 years ago with the technology at the time. And so that prevented a lot of the tillage. The second big reason that the prairie is still here is that fire never left. So Native Americans, of course, used fire for thousands of years, and those early ranchers recognized the value of fire for preventing woody species coming in and for renewing the forage quality in terms of livestock productions. We're not making any more of these big, lovely green landscapes. Joe was here just at the right time, kind of divine intervention, I guess, that the right guy in the right place at the right time with the right opportunity, and he seized it.
Joe was a galvanizing person. He inspired confidence in everybody. He was the chairman and CEO of the Williams Companies, very successful in business. It took a strong leader to organize the forces to move in the direction of establishing a tallgrass prairie preserve. Joe was the chair of the Capital Campaign Committee. The obligation was a $15 million fundraising challenge to do the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve and the startup costs and the things we felt like we needed to do. In the late 80s and early 90s, Oklahoma was in the severe throes of a recession, a major recession. And so the fundraising efforts floundered at first. When Joe became the chair of that fundraising committee, things took off. And Joe started tapping his business associates on the shoulder. And Joe just took the bull by the horns and willed the $15 million capital campaign to its completion.
I remember one situation we had where we were sitting here today in the historic bunkhouse. And so we would use this facility, and we still use this facility for fundraising. What better way to do that than bring them out on the prairie, grill some steaks or whatever, and then go out and look at the prairie, ride a buffalo, whatever it takes, you know? And so we had a couple of big donors up here for the night, and Joe was here. And after supper, he's sitting across from the prospective donor. This is the other gentleman that he'd known for years. And it was just small talk. I'm sitting next to Joe, and then across the table is Al Stoiger. And so the four of us are sitting there, just kind of having this four-way conversation. And then it switches to where Joe gets serious. And he starts talking about the capital campaign, and he's talking about the history that he has with this gentleman and how, you know, I've helped you on some of your stuff. We really need you in a big way to come in and to support the Tallgrass. We need $500,000 from you. And he visibly leans. He's just giving this guy I'm switching to serious mode now. And of course the fellow said, yeah, I can do that. And afterwards, Al and I are talking outside, drinking a beer. It's like, okay, that's the way it's done. Wow, okay, boom. That looked easy. But yeah, Joe could be very engaging at a personal level, and then he had a business side to him too that was quite effective, obviously.
The Tallgrass Prairie changed the way the Nature Conservancy did conservation and changed the way they did fundraising. They realized to do conservation on a scale that would survive climate change, it needed to be on the landscape level. And then the Nature Conservancy adopted the one conservancy approach. Before then, if you had a project in Oklahoma, you only could talk to Oklahoma donors. You couldn't go across state lines. Well, they changed that. And so donors from coast to coast donated to the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve. The Nature Conservancy had a practice. It wasn't always the case, but they would often come in and buy land that had a significant conservation value because the state government or the federal government could not move quickly enough to acquire that land, and the opportunity would be lost. So the Nature Conservancy had a practice of coming in and buying property and then later turning it to the federal or state governments. There was some within the organization that wanted to sell this back to the federal government. Joe said, absolutely not. This is a preserve the Nature Conservancy needs to own, and we're going to continue to own it. And that ended that talk. He was also the chairman of the Oklahoma Chapter's Board of Trustees, and he was the chairman of what they called the National Board of Governors that governed the Nature Conservancy at that time. The Nature Conservancy had a policy that the chair of their board would serve 1 2-year term, and then somebody else would do it. They loved, admired, and respected Joe so much, he served 2 consecutive terms. It's never been done before or since. But that's the kind of leader Joe was. It took somebody with his standing within a number of communities and with his visionary approach and with his will to make things happen and to do them right. And so the Oklahoma board felt like the appropriate thing to do was to name the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve after Joe Williams. So that's why it's now called the Joseph H. Williams Tallgrass Prairie Preserve.
We renamed the property for him, which was quite an honor and well-deserved. I think he would be pleased that, yeah, we've created this anchor site, this stronghold really for conservation here in this kind of southern end of the Flint Hills. But we've kind of created this starting point So now the big challenge is how do we take that beyond the preserves? And so I think Joe would be excited about kind of this next big push. We will never be done within the preserve. There's always things to do, and our program continues to mature. But I think our next big surge is going to be how do we move beyond our preserve borders to help protect and maintain this big, beautiful Flint Hills landscape. What we get done in the next 1 or 2 generations is what's going to matter. That's going to be the kind of the deciding point in terms of how intact, how much of this grand landscape is left. Let's get her done. I can imagine Joe on the hiking trail. We have our little hiking trail system here, a little mowed trail. It's a great place to go out with kids. I used to, when my daughter was little, we'd go out there. And so by the end of the summer, you're walking this trail, this 6-foot wide mowed trail, but you feel like, especially if you're a little person, you feel like you're in a tunnel. Because by the end of the growing season, that grass, with good rainfall, that grass can be 6 feet tall. And so it is a tall grass prairie. Well, my daughter used to love to run into that tall stuff, chase me. I think Joe would try to explain the prairie at different scales. Ooh, what's going on with this beetle? Look at this tiger beetle. Look how shiny he is. Kind of the inner workings at the small scale, native pollinators, insects, the plant community, but then also the reach and sweep of the horizon. Wow. You're stepping back in time. So I think that's how Joe would go about it. Let's see.